Hello and welcome. This is Kazim, and I welcome you all in this today's wonderful webinar about industrialization in Africa, challenges and opportunities. And today's webinar, we are going to discuss what kind of opportunities are there for the African nations and the whole continent, and how the continent, which is abundant with the lots of resources, natural resources and human resources, can be exploited, and how the resources can be utilized for the betterment of the lives in the Africa. So today we've got a speaker who has got a specialization in economics and renewable energy and sustainability. So I welcome Dr. Abidemi, who is working as an assistant professor at Near East University. Dr. Abidemi has MSc, BSc, MSc, and PhD degree in economics with a specialization and focus on renewable energy and sustainability. Dr. Abidemi has written dozens of international, has published dozens of articles in the international journals. He's author of 5 books and on personal development, which have been published in by the different publishers. So Dr. Abidemi is one of very few intellectuals I personally know who have been very much engaged with the personal development of the students and for the society. So I welcome Dr. Abidemi in our today's webinar, and I request Dr. Abidemi to please share his views.
All right, everybody. How's everyone doing this morning? Okay, my name is Dr. Abidemi, and it's good to see you all, even though I can't see you one on one. And so today we will talk about industrialization in Africa, the challenges and the opportunities that are there. Um, I'm very passionate about Africa because I'm a Nigerian. Sometimes I refer to myself as an African. And so I'm very interested in the progress of the African continent. It's something that I'm very passionate about. So to kickstart today's webinar, I'm going to start with how do we uh, define, or how do you define what an industry is? How would you define an industry? Okay, because before we go to industrialization, you need to know what an industry is. So, an industry is simply a group of manufacturers who produce particular goods and services. For example, automobile industry, the steel industry, the textile industry. So, industry relates to some certain goods or certain products or certain services that are being offered to consumers. All right. So from there, we take it a step further. All right. How then do we explain what industrialization is? I'm sure if you've taken you've done you've done some research, you would see different definitions of industrialization. And one of those definitions, or one of those explanations given, is that industrialization refers to the transformation of agrarian-based economy to a mechanized means of production, or a system whereby humans and animals were used as a means of production, especially for agricultural purposes, to using machines to produce more goods and services. It means that as a result of the Industrial Revolution, we saw and we can see a lot of transitioning from agriculture as the main source of revenue of a country to different kind of industries, to different kind of products that are being produced. All right. So you know what an industry is: a group of manufacturers who produce certain types of goods and services. You know what industrialization is: the movement from agrarian-based economy to a mechanized system of production, of producing goods and services. It means industrialization has made the production of goods and services a little bit, in fact, much more easier. You don't need maybe 20 people to work on a farmland. If you have a tractor, if you have machines that can work on that land. However, one certain thing we have observed is that even though industrialization has benefited the advanced economies, you still find the African region, the African continent as a whole, are still struggling with the idea of what industrialization is. It means that industrialization has not really benefited Africans. Because if it has, you will not have um, a high rate of employment across Africa. And the impact of high rate of employment is that you will see a lot of Africans leaving their country to move to other countries because they do not have specific places to work even when they graduate. Okay, so it's a problem in Africa if we don't have industries that can accommodate students as they are leaving the universities. If there are no industries, of course, they will go to countries where they will be employed and they'll be able to use their gift and talent for the benefit of those countries. All right. So next, we move into industrial revolution. Okay, now, like we have even though some books will say we have 5 stages, for basically we have 4 stages of industrial revolution. The first stage is about using the steam engine to power production. Okay, majorly the use of the steam engine power. All right, for production purposes and also for transportation. The second industrial revolution is more about what we call the technological revolution. Okay? The third industrial revolution is what we call the digital revolution, in which computers were created. Now we are in the fourth industrial revolution, and the fourth industrial revolution is basically about smart information technologies, for example, artificial intelligence. All right. So those are the stages. And so if you take a look at those stages of industrial revolution that has taken place, can you guess where the African economies are in those stages? In those stages. That's one question for you. Another aspect that you must take note of is that we also have some classifications of industrialization, like primary industry, the secondary industry, and the tertiary industry. The primary industry are industries related to natural resources like agriculture, like mining, okay? And out of all the continents or out of the region of the world, the African region is the region that has the most natural resources. But why are we the least developed out of all? Why? Why are we the least developed if we have the most abundant natural resources? So we are at the first stage, we have all the natural resources. So the second stage is the transformation of those raw materials, which are in the primary stage, into finished products. So one of the places where we have the problem is to transit from that stage of raw materials to be able to produce quality goods for the consumers within Africa, okay, regional, and to be able to export those goods outside of the country. All right. So this third stage is the tertiary industry. And the tertiary industry is more, they are more about services, okay? Health, education, entertainment. Those are the tertiary industries. So if you also take a look across um, those classifications, where do you think Africa is? Where do you think Africa is? And you know that Africa, in terms of population, is about, I think, about 1 point, it should be about 1.3, thereabout. Yes, 1.3. And also, aside the population I already mentioned, we also have the natural resources. In that population, a significant portion of that population are the young ones. All right? They're the young ones. And the young ones should be the brain behind any innovation within a country. Okay? So, basically, we have the resources, we have the people. If we have those two things, then what could be the major problem why African regions have not, African economies have not been able to transit to a well industrialized region? Okay. I'm going to move away from the conventional type of economics, talking about finance, talking about structure, talking about some other economic aspect like import substitution or export substitution, in which other regions like Asia and like Latin America have been able to use. I'm not really going to focus on that, but I am going to focus on one of the problems within the African region, in which I tell a lot of my students. If the African region, in terms of governance, can get their act right, in terms of leadership, in terms of the cost of governance itself, in terms of the quality of governance, in terms of having the least form of corruption, in terms of having those in leadership that are qualified enough that can be able to make credible decisions on behalf of the region. And I hope you know, quality decisions does not necessarily mean it has to be politics. No. If you want to move your region forward, then you have to come up with good quality decisions, making use of the natural resources, both natural and human resources that the continent has. So the first problem is the governance within the African region has to sit down. They have to sit down to ask themselves some questions. Do we want to continue to ask for funds from international communities or from advanced economies for consumption? And I hope you know, uh, part of the regions that consumes the most and produce the least is the African region. We uh, are not collectively now, but a major portion of the African region are consumer driven. We call it a consumerism culture. So the advanced economies produce a car, for example, and some of the countries where you see those latest cars, even though they do not have enough resources to be able to make their economy move forward, you are going to find those resources in those countries. Is it a bad thing? No, it's not a bad thing, because every producer would look for a consumer to consume its good. All right, so we need to shift from that ideology of our economy has to be consumer driven. I usually make an example in my class. I usually ask them and say, for example, if you make $1 million today, what would you do with it? You can guess. Oh, of course. It could be, I'm going to buy the latest car. I'm going to, it's a, it's a, it's a consumer driven mentality. So we have to shift. So first, I said governance. And two, we have to shift from consumer-driven mentality to a producer-driven mentality. And what does that mean? We must always ask ourselves as a region and as a continent, what are we bringing to the table? What are we bringing to the table? We call it value addition in terms of product. What products are we producing that can compete on a global scale? What product can you point to an African country and say that African country is the producer of that product? Show me one. Even if an African country is exporting goods or exporting raw materials, those raw materials that are being exported, sometimes we usually say in international economics that free trade is not always fair trade. If you have a country whose dollar is much more stronger than your own currency, of course it can buy all of your raw materials at once because the currency is stronger. All right, so raw materials are goods in terms of exportation, but you need to build an industry around the materials that you have. That's number one. Then you need to also transform those raw materials into finished products, in which that's what I call value addition. That's what I'm saying. Aside the raw materials that you have, gold, silver, cobalt, diamond, agricultural resources, the land, what are we as a region, as a continent, what are we producing? What are we producing? Okay, so when you deal with the governance, first of all, the cost of governance, the mentality of governance, you deal with that. Second, you shift our mindset from a consumer driven economy to a producer driven economy. If you shift it from consumer to producer driven, some of the things that would happen is that students will begin to graduate from school and part of the things in their mindset will be to create organizations or firms around those resources, around the transformation of those resources into finished products. Okay, so we need to move from consumption to production. And so I said students will graduate and they have the mindset of producing certain goods or rendering certain services. All right. So, in that light, it also means that we need to change the educational structure of the continent. We shouldn't be Students shouldn't be going to school because necessarily they want to have good grades. Are good grades okay? Of course, good grades are very okay. They have to do well. It's part of the criteria. But they have to be, when they are graduating, they already have a um, a clear direction about the kind of products or the kind of services that they want to render. A student can't graduate and in a continent that you don't have enough industries to employ people, and so the student graduates and the first thing in his mind is, oh, where can I go and get a job? So that mentality has to change. Okay, so the educational system has to be restructured in a way that it fits the modern economy, in a way that will drive innovation, in a way that will be able to encourage students to be producers of certain goods and rendering certain services. So, governance, consumerism to producers, then the educational system. Then I can now say you can start talking about finance. You can start talking about international collaborations. You can start talking about partnerships. But one thing I know that has affected African region the most is, although sometimes I don't like to talk about it, is because of the struggles African has gone through. Colonialism. That's also part of the things they still deal with. So the question is, do we have our Africans or the African economies, are they free from international interference? Are they free from international interference in terms of their resources? And you can see what is happening in some African French-speaking countries right now, in a way that they want to be able to have their industries produced around the resources that they have. Okay, so are African countries really free from international dominance? It's a question African leaders must ask, and it's a question the advanced economics they must ask themselves. Because, for example, this is just a sidetrack. Some advanced economies usually now they are bringing out policies to reduce their migration of people coming into their country. One of the reasons why people migrate, especially in terms of involuntary, okay, voluntary simply means that you want to migrate maybe because you want to learn things. But when it means that people begin to migrate because of economic instabilities, then that problem can be solved. That's what it means. It means simply create industries that can employ people. Let people have a better living standard and they will stop moving around the world. For example, look at your own location. There are some countries you wouldn't easily find in your location. Why? Because in their country, there are industries, they have a better living standard, they have a better lifestyle right there. Okay, so are African economies free from international dominance? If they are not free, there's a little that they can do. It means they can't take certain decisions without the approval of international authorities or international organizations. Can African economies can they develop certain products that will be approved by the international organizations, by the advanced economies? So we must look at those dimensions to ensure that industrialization can properly function in Africa. And another point I want to mention is I talked about governance. All right. Now I want to talk about the environment to do business within African economies. Is the environment suitable? Of course, if it's not suitable, You will have less productivity no matter the amount of effort that you put into it. Okay, is the environment suitable for new industries to be created? Is it suitable? And suitability also talks about um, um, political stability. Are their lives safe? Do we have policies that encourages such innovation? So if the people's lives are not safe, the first thing is survival. Nobody would like to produce anything if it's not safe. So the environment, I mean, you have to, for you to plant a seed in the ground, for it to grow, that soil has to be convenient for that plant to be there. If it's not convenient, it's going to die. That's what it means. So the environment has to be suitable for Africans to be able to create, to be innovative. It has to be very suitable in terms of political stability and in terms of innovation. All right. So these are some of the challenges that, as a nation or as a region and as a continent, these are some of the struggles that, as for example, I listened to a podcast of this certain topic 7 years ago, and 7 years ago they still talked about lack of finance, they still talked about governance, they still talked about migration, they still talked about we have the natural resources, they still talked about the population. We are in 2023 and we are still talking about the same thing. Has there been a slow progress? Of course. There could have been a slow progress. But if you look across the African region as a whole, there are some questions you must ask. Are they stable? Do you still have large outflow of migration? But right now, you don't want to know the number of people migrating out from Africa to go to just to have a better living standard. And these are the things the government of each African economy should look at. For people to migrate, yes, it's a right to do so, but it's a shame for people to migrate because they want to go to another place to go and have a better living standard in terms of the basics: light, water, food, jobs, security. These are the that's the foundation of humanity that should be made available. Okay, which means, for example, another major crisis is energy crisis. Energy crisis. How can you produce when there's no light? When there's no electricity? How do you want to produce? How? Without light, you every single day you need light. Light is survival on its own. Without light, you can't do research. Without light, you can't create industries. So it means that the cost of running a business will be very high in countries that do not have those resources. All right. So that these are some of the challenges that we have. And so, what are the solutions? We must look at the governance structure within the African system. We must look at our governance. The leadership of these countries need to have Africa at their heart. They need to hold their country with high esteem. If a leader is not patriotic or passionate about his country, there's no point of you ruling a country. You are a leader of a country. You cannot invest in the necessary things that can make your economy work, then you don't fit to be the leader in that country. A leader has to be patriotic and needs to have its country in his heart, in his or her heart. So in terms of leadership and in terms of governance, we have to get it right. You you can give African economies give them 10 billion US dollars, give them 100 billion US dollars. Without the right leadership to be able to manage those resources and to be able to invest those resources in the right places, like in creation of industries, we will keep talking about the same problem. We will keep talking about the same problem. So leadership wise, we have to get it right. The leader has to prepare his economy, and that environment has to be suitable enough for that economy to be able to function. Then, if the economy is suitable, then we can now start talking about education, okay, quality education. Then we can start talking about infrastructure. It's a quality leader that will know that infrastructure is needed for industrialization to progress. And infrastructure in such a way. In what way? The road networks in each country or the transportation network in the region has to be seamless. Okay, seamless means that there has to be an easy flow, transportation of people and goods from one place to another, just like you have in the European Union. Okay, so it's quality leadership, it's quality governance that will know that road networks and infrastructures are needed. These are the basics. These are the normal things that countries must have. Okay, so uh, governance very important. Uh, Education, quality education. Then those things will come as a result of the effectiveness of governance. Those things will follow soon. Industrialization is a small issue. We have to. It's just part of the problems that we have, but we have to deal with the major crisis right there. We need passionate leaders, passionate uh, uh, presidents. We need passionate people in government that are patriotic and they will ensure that African economies thrive. For example, if I become the president of my country, I say that in class almost every time. So what is the first things what are some of the first things I would do? For example, to also ensure that industrialization is rooted in Africa. So I asked the students and they told me, "Oh, sir, you stop corruption." Someone said corruption. Someone said they gave me different ex- um, answers to my question. But one of the things I told them is I am not going to start with money. Okay, someone said finance, someone said inequality. Those are, yes, very important points in within an economy. The first thing African leaders and as a region must do is they need to know what values do they stand for. What is it that they stand for? What do they stand for? What do they stand for? What are the values? What will make advanced economies to say, oh, that region, we want to be like them? What do they stand for? What do they stand for? Okay, what do they stand for? What kind of values do they have? Are they patriotic? Do they have integrity? In case you have inflow of money from advanced economies or international organizations, would they be able to use the funds for the right things? Sometimes, even those we don't include these in economic equations or when we are trying to do an analysis, do they love their neighbors? Industrialization is just part of the problems, but you need to establish yourself as a continent. What do you stand for? Then once you affirm that as a region the governors have integrity, they have they abide by law and order, which is one of the things I didn't mention. And another thing is we don't have the institutions are weak. Okay, weak in the sense that corruption is able to thrive. Okay, the financial system, maybe the cost of getting loans from the bank to be able to invest in some kind of businesses. If those things are not there, all right, if they are not there, there's nothing much you can do. It's an environment issue. That environment has to be conducive enough. All right, so the bigger picture as a continent, because they do meet from time to time. African countries as a whole is about there are 54 countries, and they do have African Union, just like you have European Union. So they do have their meetings from time to time. And am I saying they are not doing well? No. But we must look ourselves. We must look at ourselves in the mirror. Okay, we don't always point to people and say it's their fault or we need more money. Has more money ever solved any problem? No. More money has never solved any problem. So we need to tackle it from the root. As a region, the leadership of the region must look at themselves in the mirror and ask themselves, are we doing what we need to do? What do we stand for? How do we want to use our resources? What kind of industries do we want to create out of the natural resources that we have? So we don't need to be running all around, to be looking for funds all around. You have some African billionaires that can even borrow African countries' funds without taking money from international communities. So if you have billionaires within a region that can easily borrow a country money, and you are no, you don't need money. Okay, and that billionaire is within that same country getting contracts from the government, supplying goods and services to consumers, and he has the money to make his country to thrive. And the country has to go to international communities to go and borrow a loan at a higher cost. That's what it means. Because you are going to pay back the debts you borrow from international communities. Are we truly patriotic? No. So let's tackle the issue. Let's look at our cost of governance. Let's do a total overhauling of our governance. Then yes, you move to education, you move to infrastructure, you move to every other aspect. If you get that right, like what is happening in Rwanda. Okay, I'm not from Rwanda, but from the statistics and from the report, even in terms of manufacturing of cars, even in terms of uh, the structure of the way he has carried the economy, even though they went through the genocide, they went through years of struggle, right? Leadership. If you get the leadership right, industrialization and every other problems within the economy will fall in shape. All right. So uh, that's the best I can share with you. It's a complex and a wide topic, but that's the little I can share with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abidemi. It's really wonderful talk and very informative. I do have a question. You mentioned that most of the population currently in African continent is comprised of the youth population. So, and you mentioned there's great potential as well. How this youth can be prepared to transform the continent's all sort of need, like industrial needs and the growth and sustainability.
So, part of the route to prepare, especially the young ones, is to do that through our educational system. Because if you look at the number of people, the young people migrating out of Africa, they are young ones. And where are they going to? They are going to school. They're going to school. They are going to school or they are looking for jobs. They are going to school. So if we usually refer to as brain drain. If the larger percentage of people are leaving your country to go to school, what should that tell you as a region? What should that tell you? For example, in my class, out of 100%, 80% are Africans, sometimes 70. So that tells me that they are interested in education. And if they are interested in education, prepare them, build. I mean, no country can survive without quality education. No, because education simply means quality information. So, to prepare the youth, we need good, quality educational institutions. Very good and quality educational institutions. If, for example, let's even assume that Africans say that they do, the region says they don't want to use any other of their resources. Let them focus on education alone. Don't just neglect the resources. Just assume that you don't want to use them and build. Let each university be world class. I told my student a few days ago. I said some countries are building new universities, even though the universities on ground they are you don't. In fact, there was a recent news I read about in a country where the lecturers are leaving their jobs to go to other countries to go and teach. It's a crisis. It's a huge problem because the educational institution is like the base of the whole economy. So if you want to prepare the youth, yeah, I mean, you can't run from creating quality educational institution. There's nothing you can do about that. And so there has to be intentional investments, both domestic and international investment in quality education. If you have to get in expertise from other parts of the world, you need to get it. Are we saying we don't need international countries? No, we need them. We want them. We want to be in partnership with them. We refer to that international partnership or collaborations. We need them. But let them come, especially for investment purposes, to train, to equip, to guide, okay, on how the youth can easily build things within the economy. But to be able to train the youth, equip them, they cannot do away with quality, outstanding educational institutions.
I've got one more question. As you mentioned that most of the African countries have got heavy dependency on other countries, foreign countries, in both the terms, like in financially and technologically as well. How this challenge can be addressed, and what are the options for the African nations to address this issue and reduce the dependency on other nations?
Okay, thank you so much for your question. For the series of months, African leaders have been meeting, like the Kenyan President Williams Ruto, and Rwandan President has also been very vocal about foreign dominance, and so they are getting to understand that um, we can't continue to depend on advanced economies to get things done within our country. Okay, sometimes we refer to it as the dependency theory. And so, what can the countries do to um, be able to limit that dependence on advanced economies for everything, including even to get money to feed the poor? Why must you get money to be able to take care of your poor people? Why? Why must you borrow to? I mean, that that tells the international community something. You are not serious. That's the meaning. That's the meaning. If you have to borrow, when you have people within a region that can lend the government money, or you can raise, we call it domestic debt. You can raise debt to cater for some needs. Can you imagine during COVID-19? Some of those funds came from the international community. Why? Are we saying we can't, as little as providing for those who are vulnerable, we cannot cater for that? We are not ready to be taken serious. It's just like a child. The child is 10, 15, 20 years old. He's still asking the mom to come and brush his teeth. It's not yet serious. And so, how would you view that child? You would still view that child as a baby. All right. So, we have to be matured enough to take responsibility for both the human, the natural, and the financial resources that we have. Are we financially rich? Yes. We might not be so buoyant, like I said earlier, but we reduce the cost of governance and we are able to take care of those little needs. If we need investments for maybe building of trains, make our universities more quality, of course, it's okay. Sometimes they say there are good debts and there are bad debts. Bad debts are debts that you spend on, I usually say you spend on cars. You spend on, you just want to buy things to consume, no production. Good debts are debts you spend on investment to be able to produce all the goods and services. Or we say those investments are capital, physical capital. Okay, so we have to be mature. Okay, first the group of leaders have to know that we can't always, allow me to use the word, always beg from the advanced economies where we need anything. Once they sense, maturity means that you have taken a stock of what you have and you are using those resources judiciously. They know. They know that when they give you this money, you're going to use it for your own need. And so, even if they don't force you to do things, you will come back to them because you are not using your resources very well. So, what is the solution to foreign dominance? We have to take responsibility. Leave them out of the picture first. Leaders must sit down and take account, or take a proper, a detailed I didn't mention one of the reasons why industrialization flourished in Southeast Asia was because of technology and detailed planning. Detailed planning, technology, and they were very detailed. They knew what they wanted and they went for it. Okay, so we have to be matured as a region in which African leaders are. I must give a kudos to them. They are very vocal in terms of ensuring that we gain our independence totally from foreign dominance. All right, so we have to stand up and be matured and take up the responsibility to take care of our nation, of our region.
It has been wonderful and very informative webinar, and I'd like to thank you again for your precious time and everything. I'm thankful to all the people who are watching our webinar and following our social media pages. So if you have missed the webinar, if you joined it a bit late, you can still watch the whole webinar on our website. That's estudybox.com. And you can also watch it on our YouTube channel. So thank you very much. Bye bye.